Coming up, should nicotine-free products for children be banned? The Prime Minister wants your views. Drone strikes on Ukraine and Russia will have the latest. And Tom Bradby on our friend and colleague Emily Morgan, who died on Friday, aged 45. Action on vaping. The government promises to stop children being targeted. The Prime Minister says retailers should be banned from giving children free samples, but says the government will review stopping the sale of nicotine-free products to under-18s.
They're designed to appeal to children in the way that they're marketed, promoted, the flavours they use, and that's why at the moment we're asking for people's views on that, and that may well be one of the steps to change how we regulate the marketing and promotion of vapes.
Also this lunchtime, drone strikes on Kyiv and Moscow as Russia's invasion of Ukraine impacts its own capital. The latest on the Boris Johnson WhatsApp messages being demanded by the COVID inquiry. And Asda expands. The supermarket giant buys a petrol empire. What does it mean for staff and for customers?
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Nina Hossain.
Good afternoon. Should children be banned from vaping? The Prime Minister wants your views on the matter after saying he was shocked by reports of illicit vapes containing lead getting into the hands of school children. Rishi Sunak says the government will launch a review into the rules around the sale of nicotine-free products to under-18s. Right now, he's promised some action on underage vaping. The government has promised to stop shops giving children free samples of vapes in England. It follows growing concern that some vapes are designed to appeal to the under-18s. But critics say today's announcement is not enough. Here's our political correspondent, Harry Houghton.
They're all brightly coloured, they're all very sweet flavours.
At this lab in Kent, these disposable vapes are being tested for corrupt chemicals, but their colourful packaging and flavours are causing just as much concern. The Prime Minister said he's worried his own daughters could be targeted by vaping and now wants to tighten rules on the industry.
As we've seen here today at this lab, there are a range of products which are clearly not designed for adults. They're designed to appeal to children in the way that they're marketed, promoted, the flavours they use, and that's why at the moment we're asking for people's views on that, and that may well be one of the steps that we take to change how we regulate the marketing and promotion of vapes.
The government plans to close a loophole allowing free vape samples to be given to children. It will look at increasing fines for shops selling illicit vapes, and it will launch a review into the rules around the sale of nicotine-free products to under-18s.
Sweet strawberry. You want just the one bottle today?
Sweet strawberry, sour apple and banana milkshake are just some of the vaping flavours on sale at this shop in Manchester. Selling these products to children is illegal, and this shop operates a strict ID check policy. But the owner admits some products do appeal to under-18s.
Certainly in the last 2 years, single-use products have created more attraction because they're very simple to use, consistent in delivery, and they're actually quite low cost to purchase. Having said that, there is many adult smokers that have found vaping as a really safe way to move off combustible cigarettes, and disposables, single use, have really helped them do that.
Health experts say vaping is less dangerous than smoking, but some long-term effects are unclear.
There are some questions over the long-term harms of e-cigarettes we still don't have the answers to. So some of the flavours, for example, that are inhaled along with the nicotine, we don't know what the long-term impact on health might be.
Around 9% of 11 to 15-year-olds admit using e-cigarettes. Opposition parties say even tougher regulations are needed to stop that number rising further. Harry Houghton, ITV News.
The capitals of Russia and Ukraine have been hit by drone strikes in the early hours of this morning. Moscow's mayor confirmed an attack causing damage to buildings. Ukraine said at least 20 drones were destroyed by Kyiv's air defences. It is the third attack there in 24 hours. Rachel Younger has the latest.
This is the moment when residents in one of Moscow's most upmarket suburbs got a tiny glimpse of what life is currently like almost every day in Kyiv. Captured on social media footage from a location we have verified, one of 8 drones the Russian Defense Ministry says it shot down. On the ground, no serious injuries or damage, as investigations continue into what Moscow has described as a terrorist attack by the Ukrainian government, a claim the Ukrainian authorities deny. It is the second such attack on the Russian capital after this alleged drone strike on the Kremlin earlier this month. Once again this morning, no deaths, no serious injuries nor damage, but it does bring the war home to Russian soil. It is nothing, of course, compared to what Kyiv is enduring. The Ukrainian capital hit harder than usual, more frequently than usual, in attacks more widespread than usual over the past few days. Targeted 17 times by missiles and drones in May, the capital last night experiencing another barrage. The Ukrainians say its air defences shot down more than 20 drones overnight. But with daytime attacks too, all of this takes its toll on both the country's resources and its people's morale.
You're happy that you've survived, but you're just wondering about what will happen next.
And so too is the rest of the world. This latest wave of strikes on Kyiv designed to test its resilience and deplete its air defence before a much anticipated counterattack against Russia. President Zelensky, in his nightly address on Monday, praising the Ukrainian defenders of the sky and telling his people that decisions have been made on the timing of when Ukrainian troops will push forward. These are critical moments, Kyiv's suffering mounting again, along with fears that more attacks on Moscow could shift this war into new and dangerous territory. Rachel Younger, ITV News.
Next, this lunchtime, the latest on the Boris Johnson WhatsApp messages being demanded by the COVID inquiry. The Cabinet Office now has until Thursday to hand over all of the former Prime Minister's messages, diaries and notebooks after a deadline of 4 p.m. today was extended. Officials said earlier they don't have all the documents that have been requested. Our political correspondent Carl Dinnan joins me now from Westminster. Carl, Downing Street this lunchtime has denied reports that this is a cover-up to save ministers' blushes. Tell us more.
Yes, the government has a number of reasons for not handing this stuff over, and needless to say, none of them is that we want to cover it up. The main one, which is a long-standing government principle, is that they don't hand everything over about private conversations within government because it would make it much more difficult to hold open discussions in government in future. A second reason, it would breach people's privacy. And a third reason is that they say a lot of the stuff the inquiry wants is, in their words, unambiguously irrelevant. But today, as you say, they announced there was a fourth reason for not handing over all of Boris Johnson's WhatsApps and diaries, and that is because they don't have them. So the judge who's leading the inquiry, the former judge who's leading the inquiry, Baroness Hallett, has said, all right, then instead of delivering them all by 4 o'clock today, you've got until 4 o'clock on Thursday to come up with what you do have and explain what you have done to get hold of the stuff you don't have. That will be interesting because today Boris Johnson's spokesman said he was happy to give the inquiry the information that it wanted, but that the Cabinet Office, the bit of government who's dealing with this, haven't asked him for it. So it is all a bit of a standoff still, even though the Prime Minister said this morning they were trying to be helpful to the inquiry.
Government's handed over tens and tens of thousands of documents in a spirit of candour and transparency because it is important that we learn the lessons of COVID. With regard to the particular question at the moment, we're carefully considering next steps, but the government is confident in its position.
Carl, what will happen if the inquiry doesn't get what it's calling for?
Well, last week, the inquiry chair reminded everyone that if the government didn't comply with this legal request, somebody could end up being fined or even going to prison. So if the government doesn't want to comply with it, it will have to go to court to make its case. I think the government would like to reach an accommodation with the inquiry before it gets to that point, but at the moment the two sides are still disagreeing on the way forward.
Carl Dinnan, thank you. Food inflation has fallen for the first time in 2 years, but still remains the second highest on record. There was a 15.4% rise in food inflation in May. That's down slightly from the record 15.7% rise in April. But retailers increased prices to a record high of 9%. That's up from 8.8% last month. The chairman of Asda has told ITV News he warned against the suggestion of a voluntary price cap on food during the cost of living crisis. He was speaking after Asda has announced it will acquire the petrol forecourts and convenience stores of its sister business EG Group in a deal worth £2.7 billion. Our business editor Joel Hills is here. Look, with those food inflation figures in mind, what did he tell you, Lord Rose, about this voluntary price cap?
Well, look, Lord Rose, the chair of Asda, acknowledges, as the figures you read out show, that shop price inflation is running at a blistering pace, that food price inflation, though has eased, is still running well into double digits at 15%. The government is looking desperately for ways of sort of alleviating the pressure on households. One of the ideas it's floating around, it's talking to supermarkets about, is a voluntary agreement whereby they deliberately freeze the prices of certain foodstuffs. Well, Lord Rose, absolutely clear this morning when he spoke to me that the idea is a bad one, it won't work, and Asda will not adopt it.
I've been around in retail for a long time. We are a very efficient industry. Grocers are exceptionally good at what they do. I would warn any government of any complexion to be very, very careful about interfering with markets. Markets are funny things. They do what they want to do. And once you start going and trying to interfere, you might get an unintended consequence. The government knows a lot about what it knows about, but it is not a shopkeeper. Leave shopkeeping to the shopkeepers and leave the politics to the politicians.
Well, one of the things that the supermarkets have been accused of by both unions and some MPs is of profiteering, of course. Lord Rose rejected those allegations. He described them as nonsense and sabre-rattling. He said that prices were going up due to raw material costs and the price of labour, which we've documented extensively on ITV News. He warned, though, Nina, importantly, that it would be a very long time, I'm afraid, in his view, before prices in the shops actually started to come down again. Asda, of course, agreed to buy the UK operations of EG Group. Slightly confusingly, Asda and EG, both owned by the billionaire Isa brothers. The virtue of the deal, Asda says, it's going to be able to roll out food courts across all the petrol stations that EG Group owns. It also, note, substantially reduces the amount of debt that EG Group is carrying around at a time of much higher interest rates.
Joel Hills, thank you very much. Thank you. Let's return to our top story now on the government's action on vaping. The Prime Minister has said it will review stopping the sale of nicotine-free products to under 18s. Let's get some advice for you now from the GP, Dr. Sarah Jarvis. Dr. Jarvis, good afternoon. The Prime Minister wants views on this matter. What is yours? Should nicotine-free products be banned for children in all the circumstances?
Yes, they all should have been, quite frankly. And we do know that vaping e-cigarettes are an effective way for adults to quit smoking. We also know that the government said in the past that they were up to 95% less dangerous than smoking cigarettes. But, and then you get on to the buts, particularly there's a concern that for children, they could act as a gateway drug, encouraging them to smoke later in life, and that's never a good idea. And secondly, really importantly, the levels that have been found in these vapes from children are really, really high of things like metal, nickel, chromium, lead, carbonyls, which can cause cancer. And these were almost all illegal vapes, and that's part of the problem. When the government says they're up to 95% safer than smoking traditional cigarettes, that's the legal ones which are monitored.
Yeah, when we're talking about those vapes that the latest research has shown contain heavy metals like lead, as you say, what should parents be looking out for in terms of the potential harm that could be being caused right now to a young person's body?
Well, a few years ago we did, a couple of years ago, we had some concerns about something called E-Valley, which was e-cigarette-related lung injury. And that seemed to be mostly in the US from young people who were using marijuana, particularly in oil form, to adulterate their e-cigarettes, if you like. And that can cause really serious short-term harm. But really, it's a question of talking to young people, explaining it's not glamorous, explaining that nicotine is highly addictive. And basically, my rule of thumb is, if you don't smoke, don't vape. And if you do vape, do make sure that it's from a reliable source. And, you know, you can go to a pharmacy, you can usually find reliable sources. Look for the source on the label and never, ever add anything into your e-cigarette. But I think
Dr. Jarvis, really briefly, if your child is already vaping and they're 11 or any age between 11 and 18, what's your advice to parents?
Talk to them and explain their lungs and their heart and their brains are still developing, and the effects on young people are different from the effects on adults.
Dr. Sarah Jarvis, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. The former This Morning presenter, Eamon Holmes, has said there was a total cover-up at ITV over Philip Schofield's affair with a junior producer. Over the weekend, ITV said it investigated rumours of a relationship in 2020 but found no evidence beyond hearsay and rumour. In an interview with GB News, Mr Holmes also accused Mr Schofield of being the source of a toxic culture at the show. There has been no comment from ITV or Philip Schofield since that interview aired last night. Sam Holder has more.
See you on Monday. Bye.
Bye.
This was Philip Schofield's final goodbye on This Morning, but what led to his departure and who knew what is still very much in the spotlight. Former co-presenter Eamon Holmes has now accused ITV management of knowing about Schofield's affair with a younger male colleague, which he had initially denied.
It's a total cover-up. It's a total cover-up. Those in authority had to know. They had to know what was going on, and they thought they would dodge a bullet with this.
Holmes has repeatedly criticised ITV and Schofield since, in his words, being dropped as a presenter on This Morning and joining GB News. He admitted that he personally did not have knowledge of the affair, but claimed sources had evidence the colleague would come into work directly from Schofield's home.
He obviously stayed overnight, and there are records to show that he was brought in the next day separately.
In cars paid for by ITV?
In cars paid for by ITV.
So the management would have had to have known about that, wouldn't they?
Unless Philip paid the bill separately.
Holmes repeated claims made by Dr Range, another former presenter, who alleged a toxic atmosphere on the show. In a statement on his Instagram account, Schofield declared, "This Morning is the best show to work on with the best people. In all the years I worked there was no toxicity."
Well, hello. How was your weekend?
And as This Morning returned to screens yesterday, the furore was finally addressed on air.
From both of us and the whole team here, the crew, the guys downstairs, we love making this show for all of you.
Yeah, we really do.
This is a happy place to work. I enjoy coming in here.
Hello there. There you go.
Both ITV and Philip Schofield have yet to respond to the latest allegations from Holmes. But when it comes to business, there has been little impact. ITV's share price has hardly moved. Sam Holder, ITV News.
A report has found the Conservative Party's hopes for success in the next general election could be saved by shy capitalist millennials. It says those between 25 and 40 are the first generation to not become more right-wing as they age because fewer own homes and are starting families later, but they prefer lower taxes and like the Prime Minister more than the party. And Amazon is to allow parents and grandparents to take time off the school holidays across the UK. The new contracts are being offered at a time when the GMB union is bidding to become the first trade union in Europe to be recognised by the company. You may have seen on our news on Saturday night or read elsewhere over the weekend some desperately sad news about our brilliant colleague and dearly loved friend, Emily Morgan. Emily, our health and science editor, died on Friday after a short illness. Over the weekend, there have been thousands of expressions of sadness and messages of support for her family, including from the Chancellor and the Health Secretary, as well as from ITV News viewers up and down the country. We are ending today's programmes with the reflections of somebody who knew her well, our colleague Tom Bradby, who worked with Emily during her 23 years at ITV News. Good afternoon.
And to you,
she will be familiar to many, if not all of you.
This has been a bit of a miracle for you, hasn't it?
As our health editor, Emily Morgan became a household name during the dark days of the pandemic.
Unsurprisingly, every single bed in this ICU ward is taken up with a patient.
If the sheer volume of time spent on COVID wards exposed her to a degree of risk, she was always clear as to why she was doing it.
That was the reason we went in. We had a duty to do that as journalists, to report firsthand on the ground.
Over more than a decade, her reporting on health and politics and much else besides was marked out by its clarity, its style, charisma, compassion, and basic humanity.
Are you going to be okay?
Yes. Just soldier on. Stiff up and
Has there been a moment where you've woken up in the morning and thought, oh my gosh, what have I done? The last few days have been a disaster.
She actually began her career as a producer, working behind the scenes. For 5 years at Westminster, we worked together every day as we crisscrossed the globe on planes and trains and automobiles after Blair and Brown and Cameron and many others besides. She was brilliant at her job, it's true, but she was also incredibly funny and completely irreverent. I once persuaded our editor to send us across Canada by train with cameraman Rob Turner to make a film on how the Canadians cut the deficit. Emily referred to this ever afterwards in front of the senior management as our holiday in Canada with Rob. Like many a friendship born at work, it was full of the talk of the joys of home. We watched her fall in love, get married, have 2 wonderful daughters. She must have had her faults. We all do, but we didn't see them. In the 33 years I've been here, I'm not sure I've witnessed too many people more popular in this newsroom. We are devastated because we really loved her, and if you'd known her, you would have too.
The warm weather continues. So why not squeeze the most out of the day? Heinz Tomato Ketchup sponsors ITV National Weather.
A very good afternoon to you. A split setup as we slide into a new working week. Cool, breezy and cloudy for some, but sunny and warm for others. This is the earlier satellite and radar picture. We've got some stubborn low cloud extending in from the North Sea to affect those eastern locations, staying disappointingly grey here. Elsewhere, brilliant blue skies and wall-to-wall sunshine, making all the difference in sheltered spots. Highs of 22 or 23 degrees through the afternoon. The peak temperatures likely across western Scotland and southern Wales there. Otherwise, a very different feel to the day, where we've got the cloud cover, a much cooler, fresher feel, particularly with that chilly breeze from the near North Sea. And then later low sunshine before dusk away from the cloud in the east. And tonight, a split setup once more with the clearer conditions across those western locations, a little mist and murk here and there, but much more cloud further east with a bit of a breeze into the new day.
Heinz Tomato Ketchup sponsors ITV National Weather.